Hello, and welcome to this webinar. This is Kimon Onuma from Onuma Inc., and this is a summary of a presentation that happened 2 weeks ago at the Construction Users Roundtable in Phoenix, Arizona, at the National Conference. It was a presentation I made called Breaking Bad AECOO, and there's a lot of discussion at the conference about the industry and the challenges that we face with the disruptions that are happening. They described it as our house is on fire. And I worked off of that theme to say, well, how do we fix that? One thing I presented was the automation of the space and equipment planning system to building information modeling. This was a project through the National Institute of Building Sciences that Onuma worked on, where we took data that the Department of Defense, Military Health System, and the Department of Veterans Affairs has about their programming requirements, and automated that into the creation of building information modeling programmatic requirements in BIM into many different applications. So we use this platform and the architecture of it to say, well, what would it look like if we used it for different building types? And we went through a series of conferences, the first one at the Building Partnerships ACC conference in San Diego, California for the Airport Consultants Council. And we had the audience submit programmatic requirements for an airport with minimal instructions. We said, imagine you're programming an airport as an owner or an airline, and you're working as architects, engineers, and consultants to resolve this design. And they submitted projects into that. The next was at the National Academy of Sciences, at the Asset Leadership Network. Same exercise, 10 minutes. And then at the Construction Users Roundtable, we said, okay, now it's your turn. Let's see what we can do with the CURT audience. And we pointed them to the Program to BIM website. We'll try this later in this webinar as well together, but this is the instructions that we gave last 2 weeks ago to the audience. And within about 15 minutes, this is the results. We had 57 projects submitted from the CURT audience. Well, it looked kind of like this. It was a mixture of project types, from airports to healthcare facilities to offices, and also to educational facilities. So this is kind of a sampling of the submittals from the audience, unresolved requests for the projects, over 500,000 square feet. And as we worked through it, we spent a few days after that kind of analyzing and assembling what was submitted, and looking at the data as far as net square feet and gross square feet, and the 1,500 spaces with 39,000 pieces of furniture. That also generated some estimated life cycle costs based on the programmatic requirements. So this is obviously a very early phase program in building information modeling tools, and we use that as a basis to start some studies. So this is what this webinar is about. It's going to be a short webinar. We just want to show the results and then also invite you to try this out yourself, because we're continuing on with another conference that happened yesterday, which I'll also briefly outline at the end of this webinar. So the intent is that as the programmatic requirements from an owner get adjusted, they can be automatically updated. And the objective is to have them updated in real time. So if requirements change for an office building, for example, or for an airport, those would be updated graphically and also in the report. So this is the airport program that was submitted from the audience. And this is the offices. Each little block there is a space with equipment in it. And the airport, the same thing, aircraft that drive the need for space, that drive the need for holding areas, hold rooms, different levels of service, and then TSA checkpoints and other support facilities, retail and support facilities for an airport gate. And we also demonstrated at the conference what would happen with this program as a next step. Designers would work with this to configure quickly a variations of the layout. This is kind of an accelerated animation of what would happen in about 20 or 30 minutes as design teams work through different iterations It's not a final design yet, it's just to see a test fit basically, but with accurate data that's coming from the owner that says these are our programmatic requirements and the standards that we follow for example, the wingtip clearance on the aircraft drives how much aircraft you can park at a gate, drives how much space you can insert into the terminal to support those aircraft. And then also inserting a rapid transit line for transportation connected to the airport, and then we landed it on different site plans. So that was kind of a quick exercise based on audience input. This was from a previous conference. And then now we turn back to the construction users roundtable conference and the airport program that came in. It was in Phoenix, so we decided to use Phoenix Airport as an exercise to see how this program would land on Phoenix. And this is some of the steps that we went through to get the programmatic requirements. You can see that some areas are more resolved than others, but these are the kit of parts or the pieces that are needed for an airport terminal. And then the report from that. This same model was then exported to different formats into Revit, and this one is actually a SketchUp version of it, viewing the results of the programmatic requirements with the initial layout and initial furniture that would be part of that terminal. For the healthcare facility, this is based on the SEPS to BIM, the Space and Equipment Planning System to BIM data that comes from DoD and VA. We use that as a starting point. The audience submitted, we did not give them instructions on what building type to create. We just said, just go to program2bim.com and look at the building type that you would be interested in and submit. So this is the healthcare spaces that were submitted, some of the healthcare spaces that were submitted for a clinic, it looks like. And then we configured it, did some test fits on a multi-story building, inserting those spaces into, took, I believe, 5 floors to fit this program within this footprint. Simulating what would it look like for a new building or even for a renovation of an existing building. If the orange spaces are the existing circulation, you're trying to insert programmatic space into a renovation for this building, and the initial estimated cost of that facility. So this was a very rapid iterations of that, and then the same design then exported into SketchUp with all the components and furniture and equipment in the spaces as well. And then the exact same design in Revit. So the point of this is that regardless of what tools you're using, if you're focusing on data and the data coming from an owner, then you can start using that as a starting point for the design and construction process, and ultimately going into operations as you finish the project and you end up in handover from construction to operations. Another view of the Revit model linked back to the data. So we actually set this up so the data in the server, actually in this case we're using the Onuma system server to hold the data that came from the owner requirements, and then opening it up in Revit with an API back to the Onuma server to link to the data that came from the programmatic requirements. So this is the 5-story view of that same building. So start to finish, the audience input was about 15 minutes at the construction users roundtable. There was close to 1 million square feet generated and then pulled apart into different building types. And then a quick exercise in the different tools in SketchUp and the Onuma system, and this one is in Revit, of using the exact same data to do some configuration based on that programmatic requirement. Educational spaces, there was quite a bit of square footage here as well too. You can see the blue boxes, the square boxes are the actual classroom spaces, support facilities, conference rooms. It was a little bit random, but it more or less looks like a large program for a high school or a community college that could be split into multiple buildings, or simulated how it would fit into a single building multi-story configuration. So the combination of these 3 of the 4 building types, this is actually the venue where the construction users roundtable conference was in Chandler, Arizona, and we found a nice landing spot next to the parking area there. to land the programmatic spaces for the clinic on the lower part of the screen, the school, the cross-shaped building, and then offices on the upper part of the screen. The rapid configuration, some of them are more resolved than others. So for example, the clinic you saw earlier in Revit was laid out based on an existing footprint and simulating a renovation. The school was started from scratch, and the office spaces were also laid out as a new building. And the airport expansion program that came also from the same conference was landed at Phoenix Airport. This is a view of that configuration and a view of the terminal space that was added there at Phoenix Airport. So that's the result of the 4 building types. And then yesterday there was another conference that I attended and presented with a group there. The track was called Getting Beyond 3D, and our presentation was focused on BIM platforms again for AECOO. And we gave the same exercise. It was a short presentation. I only had 15 minutes to present, so it was more of an instruction to the audience. And there they submitted, this is an airport consultants planning conference, so airport planners, designers, and a lot of owners, a lot of airport owners were there as well as the airlines. This is some of the results of that layout, and we decided, since we were in Denver, we would land the requests as expansions to the Denver airport. Concourse, they have Concourse A, B, and C there right now. We just randomly selected, let's just add Concourse D and E. There's a lot of space out there, so it was easy to say, okay, we can imagine possible expansion in the future. What would that look like? So let's actually walk through this exercise together. This was what was given to the audience yesterday. If you go to BIMStorm.com, you can try this later yourself. And the intent here is, over the next week, we're going to take what is submitted from from yesterday. We started yesterday, and we'll keep accepting submittals until Monday. And we'll take those and present them on March 8th at another webinar, which will be a result of the airport planning conference, the symposium, and the audience submittal there. So let's actually try this quickly to let you get a flavor of what that looks like. If you go to BIMStorm.com, oops. Try this again. BIMStorm.com. And you go to the front page of BIMStorm.com. There's a big red button in the middle. Click to build an airport. And there's 2 links to the webinar. Today's webinar, which we're going to be completing and removing, but the next week's webinar, the result will be right there. If you click on the build an airport, it'll take you to the program to BIM page and land you directly on the transportation spaces. You can try other ones as well, but the focus yesterday was on transportation. So imagine you're an airline or an owner that is trying to define the requirements. And what we've done is we've collected the rules. This is a prototype based on the work that was done for VA and DoD for healthcare spaces. We imagined what would it look like for airports, and it was designed as kind of an Amazon shopping cart. So it goes from top to bottom: aircraft, jetways, waiting areas, TSA checkpoints, and other support facilities. You can jump to those or type in the name, or you can just scroll down and imagine that you're programming an airport and you want one narrow body aircraft and a wide body aircraft for maybe a 2-gate. You can add another one if you'd like, 3 aircraft, and then the jetways that are required for those aircraft. Just select the number that you want, and the clearances that you need between the wingtips of the planes, depending on the size of the aircraft. And then the hold rooms or the waiting areas. There's different levels of service: larger hold rooms, smaller hold rooms for different size planes. So you can select a few of those. And then circulation space next to the gates. Circulation space with moving walkways and other support facilities. So you could say, okay, we need some food and beverage and a lounge and a restroom. And you can keep on going, but that was basically the exercise we gave yesterday. Imagine you're programming an airport. These are templates, starter templates, but they're tied to data. So if the data gets updated, so for example, if an owner says, well, our airline lounges, or we have different standards for our airline lounges, they need to be larger or smaller or less equipment, less furniture, then this can be updated from a database and the new requirements would be immediately available in BIM. You can see the baggage claim areas, etc. And then you would go to the next button, which is the shopping cart, and it would summarize what you've selected: the aircraft, the hold rooms, the concourse, circulation, the jetways, and you can change the quantities here. So if you want to add another, let's add another hold room, you just say I want one or two, and it would update the square footage there. So this is the starting point for design. It still is going to need more work, obviously, but you put your email address here, and you click Build a BIM of the selected spaces. And this would go into the database and actually configure the request that you made, and you will receive an email, and the email will basically say thank you for your submittal, and this is what you've asked us to build, and that would link back to this right here. Here's the email, and you could open this up in various formats. The first one is in a web browser, or if you have an iPad app, we have a free iPad app, or a license for the Onuma system, you can actually open it up in Onuma as well. And then in the initial web browser view of this, it would look like this. And from here, you can export to different formats. So you could say, I want to take it out to Revit or ArchiCAD or SketchUp, or open it in Onuma and continue the work. So this is a configuration of the requests that were sent in for the aircraft and the support spaces. And you'll see that they're just stacked, so they still need to be designed, but you can use these as a starting point. So that was the exercise we gave to the audience yesterday, and we're going to be using these over the next few days to continue filling in the Denver airport layout. And so we invite you to go ahead and try this out yourself if you want to have your submittal in here. We'll work with that and present the results next week at another webinar, which you can sign up on the BIMStorm.com website. So that's pretty much it for today. This is Kimon Onuma, and if any of you are interested as owners and architects or other consultants on this process applied to your project type, this is obviously focused on airports, and we showed healthcare and other project types, but it can be adjusted to any building type. And we've been getting requests from other owners that want this process applied to their building types. So thank you for joining us today. You can contact me through our website or through LinkedIn or Twitter. We'll see you next week at the next webinar. Thanks for joining us today.